One day I go and stand next to the studio window, and I see this bird building a little nest. It was a wagtail. And I've never seen a bird building a nest. And she was going back and forth with all kind of stuff in her mouth, spider webs and twigs and feathers and then she, from time to time, she will stop and look back and see how she's doing, and then looked around and sat in, waggled her ass, and sat in. And I said, wow, making a nest is very much like making a painting. You put another brushstroke here, another brushstroke there, another layer. And then I started painting a whole series of nests as a result of this. And nests not just as they are, but also making a comment about the lost habitat that is happening around, and for birds also, the unraveling of nests and the disintegration of their habitat in the forest. I live in the Upper Hunter, in the midst of 5 acres with a studio and a small cottage. And by moving here over 20 years ago, I fulfilled a long dream of painting in the midst of some acreage that sort of like create a border between me and the rest of the world. It's only now, over 20 years have passed since we moved here, I realized how prophetic this dream was of mine and how incongruous to the kind of life I had lived. I grew up in Tel Aviv in Israel, where I also matured into being an artist. I studied art in Vienna and lived there for a while, and then moved to New York for a decade, and then to Sydney for a decade, and where both places I was fortunate enough to establish myself as an artist. And now I am living the dream, and was wondering how prophetic it was, because it has been a very fortuitous move, both to our lives and generally, and to my life as an artist. So we bought this place, which was an empty horse paddock with a stable, a working stable, an 8-stall stable, and a little cottage, and determined to make it the little haven that I envisioned it to be. So first thing first, we turned the stable into a studio, a glorious studio that when I finished renovated it, I sat there and I said, okay, now to make the art that fits the studio. And the next thing was to use the 5 acres as a big canvas and create the bush or the parkland or the little haven, or what my husband called the little paradise, to call our own. And if I look back at all the art that I made here, it is inspired by the life I lead here. But slowly, we managed to find the trees and the shrubs that found a home with us there, and they created for us a shelter from the world around us. When we came here, from the studio, I could see the highway. Now I can't see even the house that is about 80 meters, 100 meters from here. We transferred the horse corral to be a glorified chicken coop, and hand-picked 7 gorgeous-looking hens and a rooster came to call the place their home. They would free range in the paddock, and the dogs will make sure that they are protected, and we were all living happily ever after, and the vegetables were growing till the first rain came, and we had a flood, and everything died. There was the case of the echidna and the dog. I mean, this is like a nice children's story. We went to bed one night, one winter night, and we hear the dog, who was outside in the laundry, moaning and groaning and whimpering, and I said to Leslie, I think something happened to the dog. And she said, oh no, she just probably sprained her legs and all this. We got up in the morning. Next to her bed, there was this huge echidna, and she was trying to move him. And the whole night she was trying to move him, and she was probably poking him with her nose. And then she was going, Mommy, I have an echidna in a bed. And then it was quite a struggle to take the echidna out and get it back to where it lives, in the back of the paddock. So we've been living with the wildlife here, with the rabbit, the foxes, the echidnas. We also have an odd kangaroo coming here. Another incident with the birds, I was standing next to the easel, and I can see from the corner of my eye through the window, another window, on the ground, there is a whole movement going on. And then I see a bowerbird has built a nest just next to my window, and there were 3 of them dancing around. After a long time of figuring out what was going on there, we realized that there was a juvenile bowerbird that learned how to build a nest and build it in broad daylight under my studio window. And then he was luring the females. And he had a beautiful nest with all the blue stuff going around. And I actually started giving them some more blue things because it was such a fabulous incident. And it went for a while. And then one day, I see the big bowerbird, like the alpha male come, a black one, and destroyed the whole thing. I was devastated. He was so furious, this male bowerbird. And I said, oh my goodness, what's going on? So I was told about the whole story, about how juvenile learn how to build their nest, and then their parents or whoever come and destroy it. And then he started again, the poor boy. He started again, and that's when I get all this other blue stuff going around there. He did it again, and then the male one destroyed it again. The next year, there was again in the same spot the bowerbird nest. And the same story happened again. And, from that window, I also discovered one day a peacock poking on its reflection in the window. And it was a peacock that adopted us from somewhere, a beautiful one. So we put a mirror for him on one of the posts in the paddock, away from my studio, because it was annoying me. And the whole day he would just sit there and look at his reflection. Well, the studio has been a big inspiration, and also the outside, the walks, and even the weeds have become an inspiration of sorts. Moving around the world and being an immigrant and an immigrant in turn, I tend to have a connection to a place, to the natural environment, and be it the sky above the skyscrapers, or a tree that grows out of the pavement, or the vistas of the desert and the oceans. And through this, I sort of create my hook into the world. So my art is basically an aesthetic expression on these experiences. So moving here, I hadn't realized how important this connection to the land will be to me. And it had been a very productive, I would say, life the last 20 years or 20 odd years. I mean, a company I have in the studio, not a lot, but I have a lizard that has lived with me here for years, unless it's his offspring. I don't know how long lizards live. But he likes coming on my desks, and especially where I sit on the computer and write, and he sort of like watches me. And sometimes I come back in the morning when I turn on the computer or the studio light, I see his traces around. I said, okay, I still have a friend here. I call him Eric.